To begin our drawing, I'm going to place one or more supplies. The supplies are placed in exactly the same way as the annotation that we placed previously. So I'm going to left click on the supply, drag my mouse to the drawing, and here you will see that it's prompting me for a point of placement. Left click on the drawing to place, and as before, the software is prompting me for second and subsequent placements of the same source. I can right click to cancel that placement. However, as a shortcut, I can now left click on the next component that I wish to place. In this case, I'm going to left click on the transformer, and you now see the prompt has changed to a transformer. I'm going to left click to place the transformer, and as before, I'm going to now left click on the generator, and you'll see how the cursor prompt changes to the generator. Once I've placed the generator on the drawing, I'm going to right click to cancel the drawing function. Before we continue, I'm going to zoom into the components that I've just placed. Use my mouse scroll wheel and hold down the button to pan to get me into a position that I've currently got. Now you will see that I've provided three sources, but only one source can be active at any one time in the design. The active source is shown in black here and is shown in bold. The transformer and generator are shown in normal text and are shown in the inactive colours. As we've set previously in the project settings and the colour configuration, I have set a three-phase colour as being black and inactive as being pink for both the generator and the transformer. Now in my design, if I have more than one supply and I wish to check the network with the next supply, I need to make that active. You can do this by right clicking on an inactive supply and select the set as active source. Left click on the drawing background to cancel, and now you will see the transformer has adopted the three-phase coloration and the text is in bold. However, for the purpose of this tutorial, I shall continue with the TN as the source. So I'm going to right click on the TN source, set as active source, left click on my drawing background, and I'm back to having the TN as my source. Editing components is again very similar to what we had with the annotation. If I single left click on a component, it changes to the edit color, and I can drag the TN source, in this case, around the drawing to replace. As before, if I right click on it, I have the right click functions, and I can copy and paste, etc., exactly as we did before. I also can access the properties from this right click option, or as before, I can double click on a source and I now open up the supply settings dialog for the source. Now we don't go through the settings today, we're only looking at creation of a drawing today. But needless to say, we would need to go through and investigate and set all the settings applicable to this source as part of our design before we can show compliance with BS 7671. I'm just going to click that to OK that, and I'm going to highlight the second source and just delete that from the drawing. So having placed a source on my drawing, the next thing I need to place would be one or more boards. I'm going to begin by placing the switchboard. Left click on the switchboard and again just place that on the drawing. I'm going to place that slightly below the TN source for now and left click. Right click to cancel the function. Now we'll see that the switchboard is in pink because it is part of the inactive supply. It's not connected to the active network yet, so therefore it is inactive. You'll note that the source has this blue cross. and the switchboard has a red cross and a blue cross. What that tells me is that the network, in this case for a source, is looking for a load connection. Similarly, on the switchboard, this side of the switchboard, on this face, is looking for a supply connection, and this face of the switchboard is looking for a load connection. Now if I drag the switchboard and connect it directly to the TN, left click the drawing, you'll see now that the switchboard has turned black. It is part of the active network source. You'll also see that it has pre-allocated a switch contact for the switchboard for this source connection. Connecting the switchboard to a source is perfectly valid. However, if I wish, I can left click on the switchboard, drag it away from the TN, left click, and I can connect between the TN and the switchboard by using a cable. A cable connects in exactly the same way as the lines that we created previously. Before we do, I just want to make a point. We do not have to connect between the X's, between the supply and the load. They're just there to give us an indication of a missing part of the network. Now to stress this, I'm going to just drag the TN source left a couple of places, left click the drawing background, and now I'm going to connect between the source and the switchboard using a cable. Select cable and select the first point of placement. Now here you will see there is a blue bubble. The blue bubble tells me that that is a valid point of connection. Left click and you will see that it changes temporarily to green to confirm the connection has been made. I'm now going to drag my cable down along the drawing to the switchboard. Again, it does not have to be on the X, it can be on the face of the switchboard. I have again a blue bubble confirming a valid connection. I'm going to left click, and now the cable has been made between the TN source and the switchboard, and the switchboard has automatically placed a switch contact. Right click to cancel the draw function, and I now have a cable between the TN and the switchboard. To the right of the switchboard, I'm going to place further boards. I'm going to click on distribution board and place that to the right of the switchboard, and I'm going to click on consumer unit and place that to the right of the distribution board. Right click to cancel placement. And you will note that both the distribution board and the consumer unit are prompting me for a supply connection and a load connection. And also note that in these cases the supply connection is at the top and the load connection is at the bottom. Now the reason for the supply and load connections to be on the top and bottom are because in our project settings, under drawing connection settings, we configure the drawing to have a supply source at the top of drawing. Now I'm going to change that to supply source at the bottom of drawing. Okay, and I'm going to click the zoom extents button, and now you see that where we began drawing at the top of the drawing, everything has now moved to the bottom of the drawing and it is flipped around the horizontal axis. Because it is flipped, the distribution board now has a supply network prompt for the bottom of the board and a load at the top. It's important to note when you start a project to denote your source from top or source at bottom. If you have the wrong connection set, then you will get permanent issues with trying to connect the network, because what you're in fact trying to do is to connect load connections to load connections, and as we shall see, that will give you errors. So I'm going to click back into my project settings, drawing, connection settings, and I'm going to revert back to our original supply source at top of drawing. and as before I'm just going to use my mouse wheel to scroll in and continue from here. I now need to connect a cable between the switchboard and the distribution board and the consumer unit. I'm going to click on a cable and connect it to the bottom face, the load connection blue cross on the switchboard. Again, it doesn't have to be on the cross, it can be anywhere along that face. The blue button tells me it's a valid connection. Left click, drag my cable downwards, and left click to create another waypoint. What I'm going to do, just as an example, is to create another waypoint and try to make a connection to the load side of the distribution board. And here you will see the button stays red and I get an error prompt telling me that I can't connect two output connections to each other. I'm going to right click, select the cable and delete that cable. Now I'm going to place a cable from the switchboard load side to the distribution board feed side, and here you will see you get a blue button telling me it's a valid connection this time. Left click, turns green, and the connection is made. I'm now going to connect a cable between the distribution board and the consumer unit, again making sure that I observe the load and the supply connections. For this time, even though I have tried to connect between the distribution board load side and the consumer unit feed side, I have a red button. It's telling me that there is an issue. It tells me there's a phase mismatch between the consumer unit, which is a single phase device, and the cable, which is a three-phase device. I'm going to right click to cancel that, click the cable and delete. The cable we've just placed is black. It's black because, as we saw before, it's part of a three-phase system. However, the consumer unit is a single-phase device. So in order to connect the consumer unit, we must use a single-phase cable. Underneath the cable icon, we have this little arrow here. If I left-click the arrow, you will see now I get the option of selecting a single phase cable. I'm now going to left click that option, and as before I'm going to connect between the distribution board and the consumer unit using a single phase cable. This time it shows me a blue button, which is a valid connection. Left click, the connection is made. Right click to cancel. And now you will see that the cable between the distribution board and the consumer unit and the consumer unit itself has now changed to red. We've changed to red because in our project settings, under drawing, color configuration, we have defined red as a single phase. The software has defaulted to the first phase for now. To continue placing components, I'm just going to use my mouse wheel, hold it down and pan across the drawing. I'm going to make a further connection to this switchboard. I'm going to connect an end feed between the switchboard and a buzz bar. Left click to place that on the drawing. I only wish to place one, so right click. Now, as before, we see that the end feed has a source and a load connection. In the case of buzz bar components, the source and the load connection are merely indication as to the network. I can in fact place a cable connection to any one of these four faces and a buzz bar connection to any one of these four faces. I'm going to connect a cable between the end feed and the switchboard. Right click. You will see this time, instead of a contact, it's now put a circuit protected device. And if I just pan down, you will note how the text runs in relation to the cable placement. In the case of the first cable, I have run the cable from the top to the bottom, and the text has been placed above the cable running from the top to the bottom. In the case of the end feed, I've run the cable from the bottom to the top, and the text has been shown above the cable running from the bottom to the top. You can, if you wish, edit the text by left clicking on it and rotating it. Just going to resume my drawing to continue with the end feed. As I mentioned before, an end feed connects a cable to a busbar system. I'm going to continue by placing a busbar tap off. Place that on the drawing to the right hand side of the end feed. Right click because I only wish to place one. And now I need to connect a busbar between the end feed and the tap off. If I try to connect a second cable, it would tell me that I already have a cable connected to the end feed. I need to connect a busbar. Again, a busbar draws in exactly the same way as the lines and the cables, but do note, as before, we need to click on the boundary of the component. Do not try and click on the text inside or the icon inside. As you'll see, we're in a 5mm snap and we're snapping to the boundary of a component. I'm going to click and connect between the end feed and the tap off. Right click because I only wish to place one busbar for now. Having placed my tap off, end feed and busbar, I've now decided that I need a second tap off unit. So I'm going to click on a second tap off unit and I'm going to place it on the busbar. Now you will note that wherever I try to place it, it will always remain as an inactive component, which tells me that it's not part of that network. The reason for this is simple. Our software does not allow components to be placed over busbars or over cables. We must always place our components first and then interconnect using either a cable or a busbar. So if I do wish to add a second tap off, what I need to do is click on the busbar to edit it, the same way as the line previously. I'm just going to drag the end connection to the end of the tap off, left click, and now I'm going to connect a new section of busbar between the two tap off points. Right click. You will note that when we've been placing cables and components that we have been using the default values as set in project settings. We've also been allocating individual component numbers. Here I've got cable SM2, SM3, SM4, etc. These settings come from the project settings, drawing component numbering. And here you will see that if I choose, say, a submains cable, I have selected the prefix to be cable SM with a body of 1 and an increment of 1, which means that I show it as cable SM2 in this case, and the next one that I place will be cable SM3, etc., etc. Note that in the case of busbars, the software knows that both busbars are part of the same busbar system. In this case, they're both part of BB1. I have a section 1 and a section 2. I do not have to adopt the standard designations for these components for each and every item that I place. I can, of course, if I wish to, rename them to my own configuration settings. If I were just to use my mouse button and scroll down to this cable here, if I single click on the text, it allows me to edit the text, in this case rotation. If I double click on the text, I will get up a dialog box regarding the text settings. So I can override the default values for the text for this item of text only. And here you will see that the ID number is the ID number that's been preset by using the project settings. I can, if I wish, click on the edit button and I can override that value. So if I wish this to be, say, cable 10, I could allocate that to be cable 10. Okay, and now this has changed to cable 10. If I double click again, click on the edit, I can totally override the standard settings by selecting non-standard. And in this case, I'm prompted with a text box, and I'm just going to call this something unique. Cable, main cable. Click OK. And now you see that I've overridden the standard values as set in project settings to make that individual for this cable. Similarly, if I double click on buzzbar, I get the option to change the buzzbar and I get the option to change it to non-standard. So I'm going to call this buzzbar. Okay. Note, however, on the buzzbar we still have the section shown. To edit the section, I would need to double click on the buzzbar and edit from inside the buzzbar settings dialog. In this case, I'm going to select the edit button and I'm going to uncheck include section number. Now you see it's dropped off the drawing. Click OK, left click on the drawing background, and I've now changed the buzzbar to read buzzbar without any section references. So my drawing at the moment is quite full. I'm going to use my pan upwards and move to the next section of drawing. From here, I'm going to place a distribution board. And as you'd expect, the distribution board could be connected directly to a tap-off, or as before, as we saw on the switchboard, I could connect it using a cable. Similarly, I could connect a consumer unit directly to a tap-off, or again, I could place the consumer unit and connect it via a cable. Again, note that I would need to select the single phase cable for the single phase connection. To complete my network, I need to add final circuit load or final circuit motor. I'm going to click on a final circuit load. This differs from the previous methods of placement in so much as a final circuit load and final circuit motor will always need a cable connection. Therefore, placement begins by selecting the point of cable connection. In this case, I've clicked on DB2, and now as I move my load, you will see that the load and the cable are placed as one item. Again, I can left click and place waypoints if I wish to. And now I've placed a final load circuit. To edit final load circuits, in this case, I can again, as before, click on the cable and it works in exactly the same way as a line, and I can drag my connections around. In this case, it's not a very good example, but here you will see that I've now taken that back into being a single line connection. As before with the cables, where we had the option to select single phase, we also have the option under final circuit loads to connect single phase circuits. So if I try to connect the three-phase circuit to the consumer unit, it would tell me there is a phase mismatch. I would need to select the single phase circuit in order to make a valid connection for that load. Similarly, when placing final circuit motors, again we have a pull down arrow, and again I have various types of motor circuits that I can configure. In this case, I'm going to select DOL, direct online three-phase motor, and I'm going to place the motor from the disk board. Now note that because we have selected a motor circuit, by default we include a motor starter connection, and then from that connection we have the motor and the cable associated with it. Left click to place, right click to cancel function. You'll notice now that with two circuits connected to the distribution board, I've already run out of room on the distribution board. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the consumer unit, and I'm just going to drag the consumer unit to the right. Left click. Now I'm going to click on the distribution board to edit it, and as we had before, you have some grab handles, but you'll notice that I can only drag these to the left and right. So I'm going to extend my distribution board to the right. Left click, and that now enables me to place more circuits on my design. I'm now going to place some additional final circuit motors. However, rather than creating each one, I'm going to left click and select copy. Now I'm going to select paste, and I'm just going to paste several more on the drawing. So I have 4 in total. So having placed my motor circuits, I'm now going to edit the position of the starters in relation to the motor. Now the first motor has a starter at the supply end. If I wish to edit the position, I need to double click on the cable. And this opens the final circuit motor settings dialog. As before, I mentioned that we won't have time to go through all these settings. That will be covered on the training course itself. However, we do have the starter position, and here it's set at board. For the next motor, I'm going to change it to between board and motor. Okay. Left click on the drawing background. And now I have changed the position of the board midstream between the supply and the motor. I'm going to repeat that for the third motor. Double click on it. At the starter position, I'm going to select at motor. Okay. Left click the drawing background. And again, we've changed the motor position to the motor. For the final motor, I'm going to double click and I'm going to select none. That is to say that for the fourth motor, we shan't have a starter, we should only have a direct online motor. And I'll just edit the positions of these motors to put them all in line. And there we have it. I'm just going to zoom extents to show the extent of the network that we have created. Here I've started with a source and I have an active network through the distribution board and the consumer unit, down through the bus bars to this distribution board with various circuits connected to it, and also down to this consumer unit. What I haven't covered are some of the settings that we previously set in relation to the application settings. I covered snap to grid previously when we looked at the annotation, so I'm going to take a look firstly at the persistent connection. With persistent connection set, if I move my consumer unit, you will see that the cable connection remains, i.e. it stays persistent. If I uncheck persistent connection, now when I move the consumer unit, you will see that it moves independently in relation to the cable. Now normally I would recommend that you leave persistent connection checked, because if you did wish to move the consumer unit on its own, a simple way would be to click, cut and paste, and now you've moved it without retaining the persistent connection. You will note that having broken the link between the cable and the consumer unit, the cable end shows that it's looking for a load connection by means of the blue cross. Again, if I go into application settings and uncheck show connected ends, you will now see that it no longer shows the network blue or red crosses. However, for a complete new user, we recommend that you leave those set, because it does give you a very good indication as to what is happening with your network. So I'm just going to go back in and recheck those settings. And I'm just going to restore the consumer unit back to its original position. The last setting in application settings we need to consider is the use of orthogonal conductors. Now I can check or uncheck it from within the application settings. However, I do have a short button here that allows me to turn on or off orthogonal lines. Now orthogonal just means right angled lines. For instance, this right angle here. I can, if I wish, use lines at any angle by turning off orthogonal lines. And now if I were to say create a final circuit load, single phase, I could create a circuit of quite a convoluted path. As we'll see, we've got show unconnected ends. Therefore, we know that this is a valid network connection. We'll see that it's not pink, this is single phase. The software doesn't care how you get from point A to point B as part of your connection. It only cares about the network. There's nothing to stop you creating a drawing as wacky looking as this. However, once you start drawing with lots and lots of cables, it does become a bit of a mess. So we would recommend that you always leave orthogonal lines set. This completes the tutorial for how to draw within ProDesign itself. Should you have any further questions, do please contact us at information provided to you at the start of these tutorials, or alternatively, as a reminder, we can go into support and we can get support from the websites, or you can send an email through to support should you wish. Again, there is also help that enables you to go through your help topics, view a typical manual, or look at some model calculations to assist yourself. We haven't had time to go through every one of the components available to us. Those are covered in more detail on the introduction course and or the advanced course. I'd like to thank you very much for taking this tutorial and trust that it has been of great help to you in your use of ProDesign.